Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martin Phillipson. I'm Dean of the College of Law, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the first lecture of the 23-24 academic year, and I want to welcome those on the live stream as well. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 6 territory and the ancestral homeland of the Métis people, and in honoring this land's rich history, we pay our respects to the First Nations and Métis ancestors who've shaped this place, and in so doing, we reaffirm our profound connection to one another. I'd also like to remind you that this is a week of reflection on campus leading up to the National Day on Truth and Reconciliation, which this year falls on Saturday, but the university will be closed on Friday in recognition of that, and also on Saturday. I'll be sending out an email to the college later today on some events that will be taking place. ILSA is hosting an event on Wednesday, and I encourage all of you to attend, and also there are several events going on campus, and I'll send out an email today to remind you of that. I want to express our gratitude to McKercher LLP, whose generous sponsorship continues to enable us to host these lectures. They enrich the minds of our law students and those who attend. I want to thank our speakers, who will be introduced more formally in a moment, Andrew Arruda and Joe Gill, for joining us here today. But before I begin, I want to take a moment to express our condolences and pay tribute to the family of Rob Eames. Rob, who recently passed away, was a distinguished lawyer at McKercher's and originally moved to Saskatoon from Vancouver. In 2008, he became a journeyman carpenter, was an excellent and skilled carpenter, and volunteered for, amongst other things, Habitat for Humanity. After working as a carpenter, he decided to go to university, where he received a Bachelor of Arts in Economics with great distinction in 2017, and he won the University of Saskatchewan President's Medal that year. Rob then enrolled in law school. He graduated in 2019, and he received the Law Society of Saskatchewan Bronze Medal. During law school, he served as a student editor for the Saskatchewan Law Review, as well as volunteering at Classic. After graduating from law school, he worked at McKercher, where he became a mentor to many of the summer students, and his memorial service was happening this morning. I discussed with McKercher's whether this event should go ahead or whether we should cancel, and after a very thorough discussion, we decided to go ahead. But I want to express my condolences to Rob's family, to all those at McKercher who worked with him, and I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged Rob today. Without further ado, though, I will hand over to Professor James E. Patrick, who will introduce our speakers and is your moderator, and I want to welcome you and again thank McKercher for their sponsorship and encourage you to attend these events. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Phillipson. Welcome, everybody. It's so great to see so many students here today, although it doesn't surprise me given the topic, because you'll be the future users, I suspect, of AI. I am going to be your moderator today. To my immediate left is Andrew. He is here and joins us today from California. Andrew is a 2014 University of Saskatchewan Law School graduate and mentor to the Saskatchewan startups through Saskatoon's CoLab Incubator. He is the pioneering serial entrepreneur behind Flexpa and Ross Intelligence. Andrew started building in the field of artificial intelligence in 2014. In 2016, Andrew presented a TED Talk, which I watched and was very enthralled with, on the subject matter of power of AI in law. In 2017, Andrew was nominated to the Forbes 30 Under 30 in the law and policy category for his work using artificial intelligence to automate legal processes, making them more efficient and less expensive. In 2018, Andrew co-authored the book AI in Application, an in-depth examination from the legal profession. In 2020, Andrew's first company, Ross Intelligence, was a launch partner of OpenAI's first commercial product. Andrew is an active angel investor with 40+ startup investments, including a 2022 investment into Harvey, which builds custom large language models, LLMs, for law firms to solve complex problems across every practice area, jurisdiction, and legal system in the world. Andrew dreams of a world where everyone can access high-quality, affordable legal, medical, and education services, and I think very much promotes access to legal services. So welcome, Andrew. Thank you for being here. And next to Andrew is Joseph Gill, a proud graduate of the College of Law in 2011. Joe proudly serves as a dedicated technology and startup lawyer here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and is a partner at McKercher LLP, our sponsor today. His primary focus is on empowering visionary individuals and organizations. Joe's expertise lies in collaborating with a diverse array of clients, including high-growth technology startups, large corporations navigating digital transformation, pioneering scientific and life sciences ventures, and passionate founders striving to make global impact. Joe is the co-founder of a legal technology startup that was a participant in the Saskatchewan's first pre-seed business accelerator program. He serves as legal counsel on a multitude of startups across software, technology, blockchain, AI, and life sciences industries. Joe actively contributes to innovation ecosystems. He is in the lawyer in residence at CoLabs, a technology incubator in Saskatoon, as well at Cultivator, a technology incubator in Regina. Additionally, he's a legal coach for Opus, a technology incubator affiliated with the University of Saskatchewan. Joe is a driving force behind McKercher's LLP Technology and High Growth Startup Practice Group. He regularly presents to groups in the startup ecosystem on legal issues such as formation, tax matters, employee incentive planning, technology licensing, tax matters, artificial intelligence, compliance, privacy and cybersecurity, securing government funding, and fundraising through various channels. I don't know how you do all of this in a day, but you do. Including angels, venture capital, and private equity. So a long list of things that Joe's doing. Welcome, Joe. Thank you both for being here. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We're going to be directing some questions to our speakers today. I'll do that. I'll ask that you hold your questions till the end. We're going to have some Q&A if we have enough time. Having spoken to these two gentlemen last night, I think we could be here all afternoon. But we are limited till 1 p.m., so we'll try our best to stay on that. Thank you.
If I ever run for political office, I'll ask you to do that intro, because that was pretty great. Thank you.
You're welcome. There's a lot of big words there that I'm not used to, so, here we go. So to start, actually, Andrew, we're going to start with you, since you've kind of been in the AI biz in the legal world since kind of the beginning, I'm going to say. If you can kind of give us a background on AI in the legal sphere.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what AI is. And I promise that before everyone's eyes glaze over, I can do this pretty quickly, and you're going to leave this room knowing exactly how this happens. So before I tell you what it is, let's talk about what big computers used to do. So you probably think of AI, maybe you think of that chess-playing computer back in the day that beat a grand champion. Back in the day, computers, the way things worked was they just got really excited about putting more computational power at things. So to make a computer beat a grandmaster at chess, what they did is they filled out a room bigger than this with, think of it almost like the muscle for a car, but that's the compute. And then they got it in every position on a chessboard. It would see and be hard programmed into what the move was. So there isn't infinite moves. There are a ton of moves, but it's not infinite. And to be able to do that, you needed a lot of computational power. So in the past, most computer breakthroughs came from computational muscle. They did hard code some chess rules. They worked with some grand champions, but that was a triumph of something called Moore's Law, which is the idea that every 36 months or so, technology, computational power doubles. So that's the past. What's happening now is something different. In order to get a computer system to answer a question, it's impossible to hard code every possible word to come after. We all know in law that the answer to most legal question is it. Exactly. So that's not something you can hard code in with muscle on a computer. So instead, what people have figured out, it's more of a triumph of software engineering. And what they did is they taught computer systems to look at words and guess using math, statistics, linguistic functionalities and formulas to be able to guess not just the next word, but the next few words. And so what's happening now when you think of AI, think of it as almost like a really fancy autocomplete. But instead of word by word, it has ingested a ton of data, like taking the whole internet, put inside of it, and it usually says, okay, when you're talking about this subject, these words are seen together. When you talk about this subject, these words are together. And by doing that, it mimics knowing what that next or the best play is. And say when you're generating and working with a system and you say, no, regenerate, I don't like this answer, it then learns and it says, okay, well, whatever the thinking that I used to get to that, I'm going to rethink through that. And then with all of our interactions, the systems get smarter. So it's almost kind of what we do as humans, and they call that a neural network, and there's something called contextual embeddings, et cetera. You don't need to know that for sure. What you do need to know is that it's kind of like autocomplete. It understands things, and each word starts to understand the words around it. So hopefully I landed that plane.
Awesome, thank you. So Joe, do you have anything to add to that, I guess, in the context of lawyering? Because I see there's this big question out there about, you know, if we're going into a courtroom, do we have to disclose to a judge that we've used AI, and what that looks like and what that's going to look like going forward?
Well, first off, I won't attempt to, extrapolate upon that amazing explanation there. There's a reason Andrew's been on the speaking circuit for quite a while and whatnot, and you're going to see that on full display today. What I'll first add for everybody, I guess, is this frame around this whole conversation. And for those out in the crowd not familiar with Richard Susskind, who's sort of viewed as the OG in this area, dating back to research done in the 1980s. He was recently quoted as saying, when it comes to all of this stuff about AI and the law, that in the short term, the results and the impacts are going to be massively overstated. People are going to operate out of fear. They're going to say it's going to be the end of lawyers. They're going to make all sorts of extreme claims, or it's useless at all. But in the long term, the results will be massively understated, in the same way that nobody knew what the internet would turn into. Nobody knew what the algorithms and the beginning pieces that would form social networks would turn into. We just have no idea what this thing is going to manifest as. And so when it comes to the courts, I think you're actually seeing this bit of a, with all due respect, bit of a knee-jerk reaction in that we're not sure what it is. We want to call it out, though. And for those who haven't followed around with this, the rule basically boils down to, did you use AI? You have to say you used AI. You have to call it out. They still want some, human in the loop when it comes to these submissions before a court. But I sort of then ask, what is the point we're trying to get at here? We've always had the concept of, most people in this crowd are law students. You've had the concept of footnotes, and if you pull an idea from a case or a treatise or something like that, you call that out. But what happens for just general inspiration? I read something in a secondary source. I hear a lecture. I read something on the internet. I mean, all of these things combine for your creative output, your argument. Should I be disclosing all of those things? And what difference does that make? If I used AI, my worry is that we're going to start having submissions to courts that have some kind of a scarlet A affixed to them. Oh, that was cheating. And I think this is actually a core sort of reaction you're seeing with that rule as well. Some people view it as, they took a different road. You should have gone the research road. You should have gone the traditional road. You used that. You had an unfair advantage, and we need to call that out. So my biggest problem is I just don't know what the end game is on that. And then my other point I would just add is I think there's already guardrails on this. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people in the crowd heard about that funny case with the New York lawyer who submitted the brief and it was all made up court cases and that type of thing. At the end of the day, we already have guardrails. There's professional codes of conduct that require you to supervise things and be, responsible for your outputs, as well as what I would just say the market. I'm willing to bet that guy isn't getting a lot of calls for work after being effectively a national disgrace for fabricating things and taking a lazy route. But again, we have things already there which I believe protect against this. I don't necessarily see the benefit in just calling out AI instances and submitted materials.
Okay, so this kind of leads then, Andrew, to my question. This is not a law school thing or a lawyer thing. Universities all around the world are kind of contemplating and oftentimes at an impasse in terms of how do we deal with this? I mean, I'm sure a lot of the students in this room have this very question, like when can I use AI? Can I on exams? Where are we at with that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I have a toddler at home, and when he does something, I can choose to either have an interaction that might take a little bit longer and kind of teach him the right way to do something, or I could just say, no, put that down and don't touch it. And that's lazy, and that's not me being a great parent. And I think what you're seeing when people are banning things, it's the same thing that happened to the calculator. It's the same thing that happened to email. It's the same thing that happened to the personal computer. So I don't know if everyone knows this. I had to figure this out as I've gone through my journeys. Early users of word processors at law firms were looked down upon. So sometimes partners used to keep a computer in a room and not tell everyone that they were using a computer because it was seen as something you shouldn't use in your practice. And then you know what else was? The telephone. So back in the day when the telephone first came out, there was a judge that said the telephone is beneath the dignity of an attorney, and it was an American judge who said that. So what we're seeing is the same thing we've always seen. We oftentimes think that we live in a special time and that history isn't going to repeat itself. It always does. We're dealing with people who are scared most of the time. Usually people who are holding jobs in the establishment are more worried about their entrenched power and the control that they have and their own bottom line and dollars, as well as their ego. Because if a system can now do a better job than them in even instructing a student, then why would they have to deal with that professor at all? And I think we are now on a path towards AIs that we're going to have conversations with that are going to understand some of our tics, are going to understand our weaknesses, are going to understand our strengths. And what it's going to mean is that we're all going to have to level up our game. And I'll end with this because it's inspirational, I believe. Why and how did humans get into space and on the moon? They ended up using computers and calculators. There was individuals who used to do this before. The word computer used to be a job title for people. People were hired as computers so they could calculate. And we as humans, ever since we've learned to harness fire, have taken tools and have taken us to new heights. I believe we're seeing a moment where as AI becomes more commonplace and being used, we're at a moment of discovering fire again, or perhaps the printing press. And that's so exciting. That means everyone in this room is going to be part of a historical shift. And if you look at the development of technology, yes, there are growing pains and things don't always go well for the beginning first while. But from a humanity standpoint, we now live in a time with the highest levels of education, the lowest levels of infant mortality, the highest levels of people having access to clean water and food. And I know it's tough out there. I'm not disconnected from reality. But as a whole, AI will benefit humanity, but it will be challenging for institutions and those in power right now because it will force them to adapt and change in ways that generally people don't like to adapt and change to.
Thanks, Andrew. So, Joe, then what's the threat posed by AI to kind of junior lawyers and maybe even law students? Because I bet you a lot of law students in this room are thinking, should I maybe have free thought my law degree if, you know, a computer is going to be able to do this?
Yep, this is the question everybody came for, right? You know, you're going to have a job when you get out afterwards. And we were talking about this last night in terms of, you know, how do you lead in? For people who've seen me speak, they know I love Game of Thrones quotes. I was going to lead in with, if you think this story has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. But I actually think there's optimism in this as well. And I mean, it's a good segue from Andrew's point about we've always had transformational technology, and that has elevated individuals in certain ways. It's caused growing pains, but people have generally found new ways to skill up and add value. We've had individuals move, even within law firms. We've moved from the technologies that Andrew talks about, and now we have online research. We have communication by email. We're not sending carrier pigeons around based on law reporters. I think there's still going to be a role for lawyers and critical thinkers, despite a world where it's going to be incumbent on you, if not mandatory, to leverage AI. And the funny thing is the lawyers seem to think this way too. I was just pulling this up in advance of this. There was a survey that Thomson Reuters, people will be familiar with them, did just earlier this, I think it was in August or whatnot. 82% of the surveyed lawyers believe that ChatGPT can be used in law firm operations. 51% believe it should be used in law firm operations. And actually, the other interesting thing that I found from that survey was Canada was actually more bullish on AI than even the US was as far as usage. So I say that because this is going to be a norm as you go about your career. This is going to be something you're going to have to become acquainted with. The other thing, too, that I would add is we're seeing societal changes in the way that problem solving occurs generally. We went from, public debate with various answers to just Google it and I'll get a series of answers, to, hey Alexa, what's the capital of da-da-da-da-da type of thing, to asking a defined question in a program like ChatGPT and getting an answer. And I just use this as an example because it's sort of like the surface area of answers keeps constraining itself. That's may not be technically correct. And again, as students, aspiring lawyers, et cetera, you're going to appreciate that a lot of the things we talk about have nuance to them and probably have more than one answer. But you can't disregard that society's moving in that way. It's turning not into, I want an answer, I want the answer out of it. And I think that is something that you're going to have to square with. But the other thing I would say on the more optimistic side is there's opportunities here for learning more about other disciplines and other people you will encounter on your professional journey. And we were talking about that last night. We were just talking about it before the program here today. Problems aren't just law problems. Human problems are multifaceted. They involve legal issues, they involve business issues, they involve cultural issues. And when you get out in the world, you're going to work with a whole team of individuals to solve those problems. And I think one of the things you have an advantage for now by leveraging AI is getting a better appreciation of how those other disciplines think. An engineering student, a commerce student, a law student are all going to approach problem solving in completely different ways. And my assessment is if you want to future-proof yourself, you would do well to become excellent in your field, but understand that multifaceted approach. Think about different mental frameworks you can apply to a problem and add value beyond just sort of a legal lens. So again, I think there's opportunities out there, but you can't sleep on this. This is something you need to care about, this is something you need to research, and it's something you need to watch because it's going to be part of the future.
I'm just going to surf that thought a little bit. I think one of the things to just put in everyone's radar is that it actually, right now, and this is another thing that I've been advocating for, you're talking about kind of cross collaboration with other industries. Currently, it is prohibited to have a law firm that is owned by anyone other than lawyers. So if you wanted to start a law firm with a social worker and a computer science engineer, right now you are barred from doing that. It's not possible. I think the future probably will move towards that eventually occurring. Another part is something called the unlicensed practice of law, which is tied to that. Someone else practicing in your law firm, you have to have a law degree to offer legal advice. I think that is going to be a hindrance to AI systems being able to offer legal advice to individuals. I think that over time, we're going to look back as like we look back in smoking in a vehicle with infants. We're going to be like, that was really horrible. And why is it horrible? Well, right now, a very small minority of people can actually access the legal system as it's currently designed. Usually, precedent is being set by wealthy individuals and wealthy corporations. And that means most of the law is being set in a direction that isn't actually for everyday people. And I think that these tools and these rules changing is going to lead ourselves to actually realizing the true ideals of our justice system, which is truly a justice for all situation. The last thing I'll say is, and it's very important, is that these systems will need access to information. And so currently, most of the law is actually behind paywalls, and corporations own the law. So when you ask ChatGPT questions, part of the reason why it spits out cases that aren't real, et cetera, is because it doesn't have access to case law. And that's because it hasn't been allowed because there's corporate interests keep preventing you from having access to that. So I think all this will change. It'll change over time. And I'm pretty inspired by the fact that generally when you see new technology come out, it just trickles through nice and easy and then all at once. And I see that already occurring.
Okay, then this question will go to both of you, and this kind of picks up on a discussion we were having, last night about judging. And I've pointed this out to my students a lot. One of the big struggles with access to justice, I think, in our legal system is time, right? People are delayed. They're either delayed financially or they're delayed with the kind of how long courts take for decision-making processes to take place. So what would be the benefit in AI technology in that, and what are kind of the topics of debate in that? Because can we not just have judges using AI, but having judging being done by AI?
Well, I'll start because Andrew's going to eviscerate everything I say afterwards because he's thought about this. And you'll want to listen closely when he brings on this because Andrew's thought about this for a long time on access to justice. And I think generally we're aligned on these points. Like I talked about this earlier. I don't believe in the abstinence diet when it comes to leveraging AI or even the concept of taking certain types of matters and just putting them before an AI for decision if the parties are fine with that. The problem that I generally have is I don't know if society has extended, let's call it the legal Overton window, far enough to want to be adjudicated by robots or AI. I think people in their heart of hearts probably know that the AI can access all the databases Andrew is talking about, all the case law, and likelihood perhaps come to a better, more refined answer based on the state of the law. But it lacks this humanity element in the same way that we seem to like this idea that there's a squishy, fallible human being who makes the decisions at the end of the day. And that may not be perfectly correct, but it's also the way we've generally adjudicated ourselves, perhaps as a species, for a long time. So it's going to require a big leap in terms of moving towards that. I do think it's going to happen with some, we'll call it less impactful matters. You're seeing this with online courts for small claims related matters. You're seeing minor, maybe contractual disputes getting resolved this way through private dispute mechanisms. It will take a while before it becomes sort of the more consequential things. Like, I think society is going to struggle with a question like child protection or child custody. How long is it going to take for people to feel comfortable in terms of a custody arrangement being determined by an AI when it comes to their children? I think that conjures up a lot of emotional baggage. It doesn't take away from that the AI can have all of the research on it and maybe come to a great result on that. But there's this human element that plays into it that causes me some concern about it, but I'll hand it over to Andrew.
It's a big setup, so hopefully I bring a spicy take to this one. Okay, so multi-part answer for me. I think let's look at history. Banking. Originally, banking and banking services, access to a banker, was something that only wealthy people had. See it in movies, old-timey movies. You walk in, there's leather chairs. Hi, Mr. Anderson, how are things? Good. How's the wife? Good. How are the kids? Good. Would you like a cigar? Yes, please. Would you like a brandy? Yes, let's drink. It's midday. So that's kind of what banking was. And then something called the automated teller machine came out, the ATM. And if you hear the name ATM, it sounds pretty menacing. It sounds like it's going to take out a lot of jobs because it's called the automated teller machine. But what happened was, everyone got access to banking. You might not have the same relationship with a banker, but you could pull out money. Then all of a sudden, banking went online. And banking, the act of banking, became democratized through technology. And what, the very interesting part, tellers, the employment of tellers went up because more branches were built, because there was a latent market that was not being addressed. I think you're going to see the exact same thing in law. We cannot access the legal system. Even as lawyers, most lawyers, even at great firms, cannot afford to engage in a meaningful way in this legal system. If you get a lawsuit in a civil lawsuit, that could take millions of dollars, and then the time it takes 5, 10 years to seek full resolution. It's a lot of mental anguish, that's a lot of money, and what ends up happening in this system is that people either choose not to engage in it at all, or they get bullied by moneyed interests or other individuals. And so what we're seeing is a justice system that doesn't function. Now, let's talk about the AI judge thing because it's involved here. Every human has bias. We all have biases. Good biases, bad biases, all sorts of different biases. And when we elect politicians, most of the time we're electing them because they share maybe a similar view of the world as we do, or we in tune that they do. Oh, this candidate's running. She grew up in Saskatoon. She went to this school. I really like that because I identify with that individual. I'm going to elect so-and-so. But so-and-so is a human being, and so-and-so has bias. And so when so-and-so, in a judge standpoint, ends up deciding on a case, we're asking them to be a robot in its pure sense. Justice is blind, right? The judge is supposed to make a calculated decision, remove themselves from that decision, remove all of their upbringing, remove a lot of that. Now, some may argue, actually, Andrew, that's not what a judge is supposed to do. We're supposed to elect different judges with different viewpoints, and we want them to bring those viewpoints as well. That still works for what I'm about to say, which is, I think having human judges is a wonderful thing, but it has also resulted in a lot of horrible things because some of those biases has led to some really bad things in our justice system. AI systems, the interesting thing about them is you could probably pop the hood and actually see where some of those biases lie, and you can run the system without it going live and say, compared to a human, what was the decision? We're going to dial this back. We're going to dial this up. We're going to figure out where we go. Now, that is a really odd thought. I do believe in the coming decades, we're all going to have to ask ourselves, literally, what do we think about X, Y, and Z really as a group? Because right now we don't talk. We talk a little bit about things, but not on the level of how okay on this dial are you? How okay on that dial are you? And I actually think if we're going to have some tough conversations as a society. It's going to be really tough. But I think on the other side of this, we are going to see us as a human species elevate our capabilities because we're actually going to get closer to the ideals of democracy and true justice. And so I feel very passionate about this. Last bit I'll say is this. Right now, if you were to tell someone, even in some of the dire situations, what is the hardest thing about going through and dealing with the justice system? First, most people can't afford it. But let's say they can afford it or they have some way that it's being funded, maybe through pro bono, perhaps through a government program. It is the time. And so you're telling people that it's going to take 8 to 10 years before a decision gets made. Let's ask people. Let's ask people. You could go the traditional route. It's going to take 8 to 10 years. It's going to cost this much, or you have pro bono, or it's a government program. We have this new system. It's going to take this amount of time, and would you be willing to try that? Because these systems can offer instant resolution, and oftentimes what actually people want is resolution. They want to get, okay, so where is it? Like, I'm having a dispute with my neighbor. They want to move the fence here, the fence there. Tell me where we're going to move the fence. System comes out. Probably even better, maybe it's me, and I've been standing too close to computers for too long. I actually think we might actually like that more because if you look and you see a judge, you might say, oh, that judge grew up in this neighborhood and I'm not from that neighborhood. Maybe they didn't like me because of that. No, it's going to be cleaner and it's going to be kind of getting that resolution quicker. Now, will there be problems with the new system? Yeah, I see a lot of problems with the new system. Will we need to get and work through those tough conversations? Yes. Can we open the back of a judge's head right now on the provincial court circuit and say, can you dial back being sexist? No.
I want to pick up on something that Andrew, or sort of a theme you were going on. We were talking about this at dinner last night as well, in that there's a bit of a, I'll just say it for lack of a better word, arrogance that individuals within the system know what's best for the citizenry, in that it should be a choice of society. The way we've evolved as a species is by coming up with rules and policies and laws that sort of govern our behavior as Homo sapiens. And so I'm a big believer in optionality. And if people want the choice of having an AI judge, why not? We were talking about this last night, we can run parallel systems, we can A/B test this, and we can figure out what worked, what didn't along the way. But a lot of this debate seems like, well, that person's starving over there. I couldn't possibly give them this, piece of food here because there's a 1 in 1 billion chance that it's, contaminated in some way. We're stifling moving forward with this thing out of this focus on perfection, a system that won't have flaws. Andrew said it's going to have flaws. And I mean, again, another quote. I'm going to quote him a number of times because it's easy and it makes me look smart. But Richard Susskind had a great quote on this. We should be driven by the needs of society and of citizens rather than by the prejudices, even if well-intentioned, of the current cohort of providers. And there's another part of that quote that I won't repeat here. But again, you have to go out and talk to people of what they want for their dispute resolution. It cannot just be confined to, quote, ivory towers or smoky back rooms or midday drinks at the banker's office, which don't happen anymore. But that I think was an important point that, again, I credit Andrew brought this up, and I think it's worth reiterating.
The end of that quote is that Richard ends up saying that the legal system does not exist for the benefit of lawyers. It exists for the benefit of everyone who needs access to justice. And we have a very important role to play in that we are guardians of that and we can help with that, but let's never lose sight of that.
So I have a question then on building AI capability, because we are inherently biased, right? And so presumably the questions we're asking AI are potentially bias driven. So how is that going to play out? Is it time? Is it a dedication to having various points of view and like refining that technology? How do we deal with that?
So I'm going to answer this kind of wacky and fun. I think it's been kind of heavy. So like I want to make sure we're all like, it's like there's a lot. It's a tough conversation. Maybe I'll try to think of some sort of joke to weave in. But I think let's kind of open up and be imaginative here. Imagine you could feed in all the results of various different judges and then have like 35 judges electronically, or AI, issue different judgments, weave those together, iterate on that, get to a place where and then you could have multiple human judges in the loop. So I think it's going to require us to be creative using the current system. And what we should aim for is building these tools that, in a way, that doesn't lose sight of, the humanity of issuing a case decision and dealing with the legal kind of system. So, but I think it's very possible, and I think while daunting, we've had to do this in society many, many times for a bunch of different things, and we do it, and we get through it. I think the prohibition, though, on us collaborating with other people is holding us back as a profession, because I think it would be really awesome to say, hey, you're a social worker, you deal with people who are suffering from X, Y, and Z issues. I'd really love to have you at the table to help us here. Hey, your background is in computer engineering. We're wondering if we build this system, could we do this and can we do that? And I think that's going to be really important for us.
So what are the biggest challenges then, Joe, maybe in the profession that you see kind of as someone practicing in these spheres? What are the challenges going to be for lawyers?
I mean, I think it fundamentally comes down to reimagining your value add and the workflows you have within an organization. I mean, I always take this to, and this wasn't unique to law, when I first started getting into reading about AI, in terms of one of the transformational requirements or skill sets is going to be, you have to be a narrator in the story. You have to be able to kind of see the field, be able to provide inputs, construct the environment or the universe that you want as part of that. And I think for a lot of lawyers, they see themselves as building the widget. I build that particular contract. I do that all day. I build this particular brief of law or whatnot. They're not narrating over an entire experience and leveraging, technology or otherwise to do this. The irony, of course, is they kind of are doing this, because if you look at traditional firm structure, the reality is you have partners, senior partners, they give sort of missives out. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. And associates who perform research, put together first drafts along the way of this. So it's not like it's a foreign concept that you're going to leverage others to create an output. I think it just has to come down to, I'm sure it was the same way when email was introduced. I was not practicing at that time, but how was that inserted as a workflow? I had a funny conversation with one of our senior lawyers asking that very question. He was very offended that I was asking him the question because, obviously I went to him and then he was mad that I didn't go to somebody else. But the point was, well, how did email kind of evolve? And it is kind of a funny story. He goes, well, one day somebody sent a letter as an email attachment. They turned it into a PDF and they sent it over, and everybody went, oh my God, the world's ending. And then a few weeks later, somebody else came along and they said, wait a minute, why am I going to put it in a PDF? Maybe I'll put it in the body of an email. And they went, oh my God, what's going on? We've lost all formality. It's terrible. And then people started moving to more informal methods of communication, instant messaging, or they, back to Andrew's point, they called each other and had communications. What a wild concept. And so it moved in incremental ways because it was necessary. It was stifling. I mean, I still occasionally get people who send letters and attach them as a PDF, and I find it very funny. Usually it's because my guess is the person can't type. But again, you're going to see this unlock in little incremental ways. And the big part of it is I want firms to adopt a curiosity mindset. If you're not opening up gateways for discussion within your firm about AI or about anything innovative, any type of new legal technology otherwise, you're doing yourself a disservice. And you're also probably not doing as good a job as you could about attraction and retention, because I think a lot of the people, I like to think the individuals who are sitting here in this room are generally interested in the future of law, maybe how it might change. And when you get to firms, you probably want some agency to be able to have those conversations and feel heard and feel like you have some impact beyond, put it in the suggestion box, we clear it out once a year. So curiosity is a big thing for me within firms.
I don't think any of y'all are going to have a problem with dealing with any of the new reality. And the reason why is you don't even have your workflows yet. And when you're going to get into your workflows, you're going to use the tools that are common of the day, and then eventually what's going to happen is like 60 years from now, there's going to be a person up here, and they're going to be talking about this new thing, and you're going to be telling them in your head, you're going to be like, that sounds pretty ridiculous, I don't want to use it. They're going to tell you should. And then some junior folks who are just graduated are going to be like, I can't believe you don't use the telethink thing. And you're like, in my day, we didn't just think and send each other messages. We used to email them. And it's going to keep happening, and it's going to be totally fine. I think the big difference that you have to consider is, do you want to be someone who is using these tools and make it part of your core competency? That's your decision. You could do it. You're going to be well insulated. There's going to be jobs. It's not like overnight everyone's going to lose their legal jobs. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to make more. There's going to be more jobs in law. Will they all be lawyers, and will those lawyers all look exactly like the lawyers of today? No. Will the paralegals look like exactly like the paralegals of today? No. But back in the day, I don't know if y'all know this, early lawyers, how it worked, pre-kind of case law, is they would, like Abraham Lincoln, he traveled around with a book, and it just had like really cool sayings in it, like, he who smelt it dealt it, and that was it. And then he would go to another town, and people would be like, hey, and that's why it was called a circuit, because you had to go in a circuit courts, and they would be like, this person so, and it's like, if you found the offensive property, then that property is offensive. And then everyone would be like, makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So it already means something different to be a lawyer today. And I think most of the hysteria and like this stuff, like, what does it mean? And is a replacement, is coming from individuals who who don't want to change their tool. And you know who else doesn't want to change their tool? Me, for example. Like, I use something called Slack. Slack released a new interface on it. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to learn this new interface. And I'm in tech. So like, I get it. We just don't want to learn it. I don't. I tried TikTok, for example, and I'm not trying to sound like an old person. I'm not. I was like, not for me personally. I couldn't do it. It was like a full-time job. You know what I mean? And so that's okay. That's like, and so I wouldn't be worried as much as I'd be like, look, it's going to be there. The idea that people are banning you from using it is going to sound as outdated as people saying, did you use the intranet or a personal computer to do this work? It's like, yeah. So it's just the hysteria and stuff coming is just people dealing with their own thing. This is like those tests where they show you an image, like those psych tests, and then you see it. New technology is that. What people believe, they see in the new technology. So if people are like more doomer vibes, they're going to get doomer like seeing. If people are optimist, they're going to see optimism. And guess what? All that's okay, because to get to the right solution, you need to have people on both sides debate. So let's debate, let's get better, and let's do it together.
Okay, final question before I open it up to students and folks who are here. How do we, if we're advocates of AI and we're in institutions or in our professions, how do we promote that curiosity? What can we be doing to kind of have those conversations? Because I see the institutional pushback, from the university, and kind of two sides to the debate that seems to be happening. So how do we promote that curiosity?
I think this is the big problem in law. It's so siloed, and when y'all joined, doesn't matter your age, it goes by seniority. Like, you have to earn your stripes until you're a senior partner, and then the senior partner sometimes doesn't have to, like, the problem with this all is that in order for us to actually work through and promote getting to the right thing, means everyone should have an ability to speak to things and problem solve and bring their thoughts to the table. the fact that we're so siloed and have this kind of division between seniority, also types of firms, this firm is better than that firm because of this and that, that's garbage, and it's going to go away. It's going to take a long time, but eventually it will. There's going to be a new way of doing things. And so I think, let me answer the question. How do we promote it? In an ideal world, how you promote it is how this is not new. It's how you work through and solve problems, which is cross-collaboratively with people from other backgrounds, with a diversity of viewpoints and seniority levels. Will that happen? Light a candle, say a prayer.
I mean, Andrew touched on it. One of the things is firms and organizations, as Andrew said, you're going to have other options other than just firms, I think, in the future, have to be open to a diversity of viewpoints. And you're going to figure that out. That's going to be something that's hard when you're at, dog and pony show event at firm X or whatnot, and you'll ask them, do you really pinky promise care about what the articling students say, for instance? And of course they'll say yes in that instance, but then you have to do your diligence and you have to talk to the associates who work there. Do they feel they have a meaningful impact on the way things are going? Does the firm actually take the suggestions from the innovation committee and work with them? Or do they just have the words innovation committee up on the website because it's cool to do that and makes them sound, they have a competitive advantage? So I agree. Some of this just starts with breaking down a bit of that hierarchy, and some firms do this better than others. I'm not going to pretend that it's an easy thing for a gigantic, say, international firm. I don't have that experience myself in terms of having worked for a firm like that, but I have to imagine that's a lot tougher than a firm of 10, 15 individuals where there's less sort of top-down bureaucracy associated with that. But the other side of it is, don't be afraid to bring stuff up. I mean, I know it's challenging, and when you join the firm or you join the organization, it's pretty easy to just go with the flow and not ruffle any feathers. But you're going to find a home that values your viewpoint. If it's thoughtful, if you think you can change the way things are being done, don't stay silent about that. Have the courage to bring it up. And you can do it in a thoughtful way. It doesn't need to be, oh my God, we got to get robots tomorrow or we're all dead. It doesn't need to be hyperbolic. It doesn't need to be the other side too. We were chatting about this before. You also have to frame this in a way that isn't an indictment of the people who built the status quo. You can have a respectful conversation without making the senior partner feel that you're indirectly telling them they did a crappy job for 40 years building a firm. Objectively, they did not, because they have a decent firm and they've made okay money. Again, we can debate the metrics on that side of it. But I think don't discount your own viewpoint and your ability to bring forward and affect change.
All right, I got a fun joke / story that I'll lighten this up and land, I think, what this all means. So young person, let's call him Tony. Tony loves the pot roast that his dad makes. And so he says, hey, Dad, how do you, I love, give me the recipe. Dad does it. And he's like, and then at the end, we cut the end of the pot roast and we put it on top. And he asks his dad, why do we do that? And he says, I don't know. Grandpa always used to do it. You should ask him. So Tony goes to Grandpa and says, I'm trying to learn how to make the pot roast. She's like, good, it's a really nice dish. Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. He goes, so I put the salt, I put the pepper, yeah. And then I cut the end and I put it on top. Yes, you always have to do that. Very important you do that. That's the secret. That's kind of how this all works. And he says, Grandpa, why do we put the piece on top though? And he goes, good question. That was great Grandpa who had that. He's still alive in this instance, so follow me. So he goes, he is in a home, but he's still all with it. And he goes, hey, great grandpa. He goes, yes. And he goes, I'm learning how to make the pot roast. He goes, that's a good dish. It's a really nice one. He goes, why though, you cut the end and you put it on top? Yeah. Why did you do that? Oh, because the container I used was small. So I always had to just cut it and put it at the top. That's what we're going to discover in law, all the tops of those pot roasts.
Okay, so I think we have a few moments for questions here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of, if you want to put your hand up, if you have a question, I'll bring, right over there. I think we'll start in the back there. You can come down to this mic, though, so folks can hear you and introduce yourself as well.
Hi, thanks for being here today. My name's Adam, and I was curious. You were talking about becoming competent with AI, making it part of your lawyer's toolbox. So I'm somebody who has really only experienced AI as something trying to kill me in video games. So where do I go and what do I do to learn how to use AI in a competent manner?
Well, I think the same thing happened with computers. Back in the day, some of the plots of those movies was just that the computer was going to kill you. And then once computers became widespread, it was the AI was going to kill you. So I do think sci-fi is to blame for a lot of the fears of this too. So there's that. How do you become competent? Use the tools, check them out, see where the strengths are, the weaknesses are. Just like you have learned how to use any new technology tool, I don't think there's going to be a fundamental big difference. It's going to be a lot of the same patterns that you use to learn an e-discovery tool, for example, or how to make the most out of like your Outlook, et cetera. There's just going to be tips, tricks, and it's going to come organically. I actually don't think it'll be hard. You don't need to learn how to code. As a matter of fact, the innovation of AI is that we now speak the same language to each other. The machine speaks to you in a language you understand, and you can speak to the machine. That's the coolest thing about AI, is you don't have to program.
And there we go. I'll add quickly on that too. Is I think it's like forming a habit in many respects. You know, when I first got into this and I wanted to learn more, and then to Andrew's point about trying it out, I set specific times. I still do this. I have an hour every Friday afternoon because a lot of lawyers don't do that much on Friday afternoons. Maybe others do, but I spend the time going through and reading about AI and testing out different, pieces of AI software, trying to find use cases, just having that dedicated curiosity time. And I build it into my week as part of it. And I think just like going to the gym or eating healthy in terms of a habit-forming exercise, if you want to learn about something, it's sustained, can even be micro efforts to better educate yourself and try stuff out. So.
All right, thank you very much.
Great. I think we'll go over here next.
Hi, Arthur. You touched on this a little bit, but could you please expand on kind of some of those barriers preventing companies from accessing training data, so like court documents and the like?
Yeah, so in Canada we have Canly. So depending on if Canly allows you to train on the data or not, you can access it. But it's not something that's just easily accessible that you can then just train with organically. In the United States, it's even more of a problem because it's just behind paywalls. My first company, Ross, has brought an antitrust lawsuit against Thomson Reuters Westlaw to free the law from behind that paywall. Stay posted on that. But I guess that is one of the ways that it's just difficult to build with primary law overall in ways that including the updatability. So a lot of these systems will get access to cases before they hit publicly available sources, and that's really problematic for a variety of different reasons. So there's something called the Free the Law movement. If you Google that, Free the Law movement, it's happening in both Canada and the United States and around the world, the UK as well. And it's something that is in its nascent. It's been around for decades, but I think it's still early, and that could be something that you check out and play a role in.
And we'll head over there.
Yeah, great discussion. Really enjoyed it. I'm thinking about AI with the creation of laws and playing into the political system, and kind of how do you see that playing out? In particular, I was curious also, for example, with sentencing, you talk about like there's mandatory minimums in the U.S., which have historically disenfranchised certain groups of people. For example, like crack was more sentenced more heavily than cocaine because of the different populations that use those drugs. So how do we prevent like AI tools in sentencing and within the political system from being used as like weapons against minorities?
Sure. I mean, one of the oversimplified, and then I'm sure Andrew will extrapolate on this, is, I mean, it's a great tool for inputs of information. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're going to go out of our way and regulate a broad swath of human activity or whatnot, we need the right information to make those decisions. And unfortunately, I'm sure many in this crowd who have written research papers, the historical experience at times in putting together laws, the research was lacking, or it was specifically biased in a way to, as you were just discussing there, it was meant to address a particular segment of society without sort of the consequences of that. So back to these comments we've been talking about, to the extent it can at least illuminate bias and give us better data to make decisions on, I think that's one potential use of it.
Yeah, I think if you had access to all the law and it was updated at the same way publicly and you could build with that, what's really cool is you could actually say, show me all the cases where someone of this background with these details on this has been sentenced to X, Y, and Z, and you wouldn't need a huge legal team. So most of the time, like in order for you to get true justice, you need a huge legal team, you need a bunch of people doing a bunch of things, and I think we're going to get to a world where we'll be able to expose biases easier. And then for the AI system, there's something called Go. It's a game like similar to chess, but there are more moves in the Go game than grains of sand on Earth or something like that. Something like that. And they trained a system to play Go, and it was playing a grandmaster. And in a grandmaster game, which it beat the grandmaster, it made a move that had never been done before. And everyone kind of was like, oh my God, like it made a mistake, and then it won. And so why I bring that up is I actually think if we ask AI systems questions, it might actually help us advance legal theory quicker, because in order for precedent to be set, it's like 10 years. And also right now, like I said, it's just the reality of the system. You need a bunch of money to do it. So you're either going to raise money from, and you get societal like push to do that, or it's a corporation or a wealthy individual. And so you can have these systems run various scenarios and come up with new legal theories, and then we can debate them and discuss them. So I think we might be on the cusp of a tool that allows us to be very creative. I do want to say this point. Imagine a society where everyone who works is doing a job that they actually want to do.
Thanks.
I think we only have time for one more question. So we'll do one more, and then we'll have our students come up and thank our guests.
Okay. Hi, my name's Tim. I'm a second-year student here. I wanted you to reflect a little bit on the implementation that machine learning is going to have in our legal system, especially in the context of the writer strike going on in your home state right now. When we start pushing people out of the legal profession, you talked about the elitism that the access to justice has. What about the legal profession itself, where only the best and brightest lawyers, the grand masters of law, will be able to practice, and the rest of us lose our jobs to computers?
I'll jump on this first. I don't think that's hyperbolic. I actually think one of the points that's going to happen with AI is that the best are going to acquire a weapon for even greater leverage than they otherwise would. I mean, if you can bottle up the greatest whatever type of lawyer in an AI, and that lawyer can then sell it as effectively a scalable solution across a country or across another area, and people are willing to use that for solving of their problems, that's going to happen. Going back to my earlier point about, I think there's this societal shift away from, I don't need a lawyer, I want the lawyer. And I think that's happening in the way that we're just answering questions along the way. So, I mean, going back to the question about future-proofing and whatnot, people are going to have to up their game. You're going to have to consider additional value adds. Maybe this is a little too harsh. If you aspire to a middling career, I think you're going to have problems, because the best are going to be able to leverage this to great effect.
So every time new technology comes out, everyone thinks they're all going to lose their job to it. And the only job over the last 100 and something years that actually has been totally replaced was elevator operator. And I'm not being flippant here. And so let me answer your question. I really genuinely believe that it is going to allow individuals who might not have gone to the same law schools, who might not be at those firms, to actually bring and beat those institutions, because they won't need 20 associates to find them things. They'll be able to use AI systems and level the playing field. And I think we're going to need more lawyers, not less, because the legal market, a bunch of people right now need access to lawyers and can't afford it. Will you get paid hundreds of dollars an hour? Maybe not. Maybe you'll get paid $45 for every answer you approve, but you could do 7 or 8 in an hour, and then it adds up to the same amount or more. But my point is I think this is one of those moments where I could be totally wrong, and I might be naive, but I actually think if used correctly, it'll level the playing field, and individuals are going to be able to beat those individuals who traditionally relied on money to win in legal cases.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to have some students come up and thank our guests today. It's been amazing to hear about this and to think about this and be curious. So thank you, everyone.